Welcome to the Fusionary Health Podcast. I have an incredible guest in store for you today, Dr. Christine Schaffner. And Christine is someone who I have been following for almost 2 years now because I was at a
Mhm.
conference. I was at the Biohackers Conference in Beverly Hills. And when you go to that conference, they give you this bag of goodies. And I'm always weary, like,
Mhm.
who made this stuff? I don't know about this stuff. But I opened up the bag and it had this bottle of sleep cream in it. And I was on a completely different time zone, West Coast time zone. I live in Florida. And I was like, you know what? I'll try it. It sounds kind of weird, but I'll try it. So I rubbed it on my temples, I rubbed it behind my ears, and I got the best sleep. And I thought, ooh, maybe that was placebo. I'm going to try it again. So I tried it again. Again, I got phenomenal sleep and I became a super fan of this product.
Oh,
So thank you, Dr. Christine, for making it. And thanks for being on the podcast.
oh, oh, thank you so much for having me. And I love sharing Somnium and helping people get a good night's sleep, amongst many other things. And I'm just really happy our paths crossed through that conference. I really enjoyed it. That was actually the first biohacking conference I went to, and I've known Dave for a while, and I had the opportunity to share Somnium. So that was really a fun connection. I loved how the universe connected
Yes,
us.
for sure. So let me introduce you. Dr. Christine Schaffner is a board certified naturopathic doctor who's helped thousands of people recover from chronic or complex illnesses. Through her online summits, her Spectrum of Health podcast, her network of Imminence health
Eminence.
clinics, and her renowned online programs, Dr. Schaffner goes beyond biological medicine, pulling from all systems of medicine and healing modalities to help patients reclaim their wellness and reveal their brightest light. I'm really excited to chat with you today because I actually have just a very tight handful of products that I personally use on myself. And when I fall in love with a
Mhm.
product, I sign up. I'm like, yes, and whenever someone's my client, which I do Ayurvedic practitioner work, I will start giving them these different products outside of my own product line because I'm like, this thing works. So Somnium, this
Yeah.
nighttime GABA cream that you made, is usually my first solution with anyone who's like, I wish my sleep was better. And I'm like, let's start with
Mhm.
one cream. Let's start with deep sleep tea, which I designed as an Ayurvedic adaptogenic tea. And let's just start there and see if we can win at just bringing herbs and natural solutions and allowing the body to support its own sleep cycles. So will you explain this product and why it works?
Yeah, I love it. And I love that you start there. Sleep is such an important part of really regenerating and healing and emotional regulation and trauma regulation in our brain. There's so many aspects of how important sleep is. It's also a very potent time where our brain self cleanses through the glymphatic system. And I partnered with a mentor and a friend, Dr. Marco Ruggiero, to create this cream. And one of the things that he taught me is the power of really combining really key ingredients with what we call microbial chondroitin sulfate. So, chondroitin sulfate, we know a lot through glucosamine products and joint health products, but those come from animal derived sources. And this is actually microbial derived. It's derived from a probiotic. So he was very brilliant to come up with this. And I'm a fan of the lymphatic system, and many people have compromised guts before we work with them. And there's a lot of things that have to happen in order to get a pill, through the liver and the gut and into circulation and into the brain. And GABA, especially, is a very hard neurotransmitter to get into the brain. And so we combined GABA with this microbial chondroitin sulfate to apply topically along the temples and behind the ears, so it can traverse into what we call the interstitium, which was a newly discovered organ in the last 10 years. It travels into the lymphatics and it can cross the blood-brain barrier. And so you can really use this for not only the relaxation effect, for stress, anxiety, meditation. I've enjoyed that to sink into meditation more deeply. And then it really helps all phases of sleep. So GABA helps you fall asleep, and it helps increase what we call deep sleep or delta wave sleep or restorative sleep. as well as REM sleep. And these two phases of sleep, both deep and REM sleep, are very key to our overall health and well-being, and keeping our brains, healthy and preventing disease, and also recovering from whatever you're going through. So that was really the topic, kind of how we got involved. And I had already been really excited about the glymphatic system, and I just thought you give everyone melatonin or sleep support, but it's really getting people into these phases of deep and REM sleep that the glymphatic system acts more potently to cleanse the brain at night.
It's interesting. We are talking so much more in the health and wellness world now about brain health, Alzheimer's,
Yes.
dementia, menopause, how menopause is a
Yes.
huge transition for the brain. And I'm in my 40s, definitely in the perimenopause phase, and I can honestly say brain health is becoming more and more important to me right now, just so I can keep my
Yeah.
brain working at all cylinders the way I want to. Because
Mhm.
nowadays our lives are busier. Life gets more and more complicated, I think, as we age at times. And so it's even that much more important to focus on our brain health and have the access we need to it. So you and I were speaking offline before the podcast about Lymph Flow, your other product. And I said, I love
Mhm.
Somnium so much that now I'm so curious about the next cream and what it does.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that it's for glymphatic. So will you explain that and what your thought process was there?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was my first product that I co-created with Dr. Ruggiero. And I see a lot of patients who have chronic complex illness. And so many of the root causes can be trauma, it can be environmental toxicant exposure, it can be the effect of the environment on our immune system. So stealth pathogens can thrive, like parasitic infections or viruses or retroviruses, or Lyme and co-infections, or mold or fungi, or everything in between. And most of my patients are suffering from some type of neurological presentation, a lot of neuroinflammation. They can have whole body multisystemic symptoms, but as you mentioned, our brain health is so important. And when all of a sudden your memory is getting less sharp, your cognitive faculties are declining, you are not having good short-term memory, you have brain fog, you have insomnia, that can also look like depression, anxiety, you can't focus. This is becoming more and more a norm in
True.
America. And what we see is that when we discovered the glymphatic system, which is a newly discovered organ in I think 2014, 2015, we know that this is a really key part of keeping our brains healthy and also reducing inflammation. And things are complicated, but there's an elegance in healing, right? I know Ayurveda sees these patterns, right? And if you tune into the pattern, you can often get people well. And so I look at the patterns from a different lens, but they really, coincide and integrate really well. So when I heard about the glymphatic system, I already knew about the lymphatic system. My patients taught me early in my career. I've been practicing for about 14 years. And they taught me very early on that the lymphatic system is a key to recovery. It's this intersection between the waste removal system and also the immune system, really understanding what antigens or what pathogens need to be identified and cleared out of the body. And I found when people, started moving that, they felt better alongside their protocol. So when I heard of the glymphatic system, I was like, okay, everyone's going to, focus on this because our brain health is dependent on glymphatic activity. So we know that there are two or there's a lot to share here. So our glymphatic system works most when we are sleeping. Our brain shrinks 60% in size to actually have this really rush of lymphatic flow that flows along the arteries and exits out alongside the veins in the brain. We need, again, to achieve these deeper states of sleep and this REM sleep where there's more of this rush of activity and blood in the brain. And then we need the removal, right? So it's not like a two-way street. We need it to move in and move out. And with the lymphatic system, it's a highly interconnected system. So if you don't have that outflow, you can have a lot of stagnation. So there's two big routes of and kind of how the glymphatic fluid gets drained. One is through the cervical lymph nodes alongside the jugular veins. So that is in the neck. So you might have had a cold or a flu or a strep throat, and you've had these inflamed lymph nodes. If you have chronic infections, you often have this low grade, we call them a string of pearls, lymphatic kind of congestion in the neck. We also have, if you do a cross section of the head, there is a lot of drainage through what we call the cribriform plate that's in the nasal passage, and then alongside the tonsils. So the tonsils are a really important lymphatic tissue that are at the base of the brain. So if that's congested, if you have chronically inflamed tonsils, or actually like they become so infected and kind of, distraught that they become a reservoir of infection, that can be a obstacle for drainage out of the brain and also for the gut, because it's at the top of what we call the GALT, or gut associated lymphoid tissue. So we found Dr. Ruggiero was working with children with autism, and they found glymphatic pooling in these children who had neurological
Wow.
symptoms. And so they thought, like, well, what if we do ultrasound on the neck? Would that drain the lymph in the
Hmm.
brain? And it did. And so we came up with this cream together that has the chondroitin sulfate that I mentioned already. It's kind of like the Trojan horse, or kind of the way like a liposome is to kind of deliver kind of key ingredients into the lymphatics where we need to, get the medicine. And so we want to create flow. So the chondroitin sulfate, the phosphatidylcholine, chondroitin sulfate is what we call a proteoglycan in the body. So they have these feathery like projections in the lymphatics to move fluid. Sulfate also increases exclusion zone water in the body, so it's going to help create more movement in the area that it's
Nice.
applied. And then there are these probiotics that create a peptide called a macrophage activating factor. So it gets to the root cause of the infection of why you've had chronically inflamed lymphatic nodes. So we've started, with the neck, and that's a key area that's kind of a really all-in-one brain drainage when you do the lymph flow and the somnium. So we're getting people to the sleep, we're getting people to the right stages of sleep, and then we're making sure the lymphatic fluid drains. So that's kind of how I look at that. But we found a lot of really cool things with lymph flow. It can help with pain. It can help with areas that have lymphatic congestion outside of the neck. So we can put it over the liver or the kidneys and the adrenals, or the lymph nodes in the groin and the pelvic floor. If you have a lot of pelvic floor issues, if you get swelling after you fly, or you have swelling or pain in your lower legs, you can put it behind your knees and on your
Okay.
ankles. I work with scars, and I do a lot of scar therapy, and you can put it over scars, and that can help mitigate the scar tissue influence on the fascia and the electrical system. So it's a multifaceted, cream, and, using it for many years,
Nice.
my patients teach me, they get creative in their treatment, and they, teach me to really, explore these other areas. So yeah, that's kind of like the dynamic duo. If you want to prevent cognitive decline or any, neurological condition, it's a great treatment. And of course, you get more restorative sleep. And then if you're suffering from, anything in between, we need our autonomic nervous system to regulate our body and to restore communication when we're sick. So there's a lot of benefits from this combination.
Nice. And one question I have is, when it comes to sleep, so many people say, I sleep fine. And once I
Yeah,
created my sleep tea, I realized, wow, the world has such different viewpoints on sleep.
yeah,
Once I studied sleep from Ayurveda,
yeah,
realized, okay, if we don't sleep, we're not going to clear inflammation. If we don't sleep well,
yeah,
we're not going to clear our lymphatic. So just fine sleep,
yeah,
okay, decent sleep is very different than beautiful, optimal sleep with deep
yeah,
sleep and all the right stages. But I have a lot of people around me who are like, I don't want to be addicted to a sleep solution. And so I play
yeah,
with any sleep solution I have. I go on and off my tea I do have every day, 'cause I don't see a problem with ashwagandha and brahmi on board every day. So with your cream,
yeah.
is there ever a concern of like you'll be reliant or you'll be making your GABA not work anymore by using it?
Yeah, great question. There's that inhibitory feedback kind of loop that we all kind of think about when we're using a neurotransmitter or using a hormone like melatonin. I have had lots of ideas over the years, but kind of where I've landed, it's always great, to take a break from something if, you want to just see how your body is doing without it. But GABA is very safe. And, we have many things in life that inhibit optimal GABA production, so I feel that it's a safe tool. It's at a low dose. We're not going to override any kind of physiological processes. And we need vast amount of GABA, in our bodies. So I don't think it's going to inhibit that. And, I am a little biased and jaded because I work with such a sick patient population, that if you can do anything to help get improved lymphatic drainage, that is going to be such a great gift for your body, because we are constantly inundated with environmental toxicants in our environment. And, the more kind of exposures over time, we have to have a great elimination system. So I really feel that it's a really safe product. And we can talk, if you'd like, Shivani, that there are factors like if you've ever had a concussion or traumatic brain injury, or if you have insomnia, that creates, a lot of inflammation and impaired glymphatic activity. So whatever we can do to, support you, I think is really, really important and worth it.
True. I mean, you bring up inflammation, such a good point. We're all inflamed. We all have this chronic low grade persistent inflammation causing damage. And a lot of times with the brain, the issue is subtle. So when it's in the gut, it's like, oh, my stomach's off, I'm constipated.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, all the signs of inflammation are quieter until they get really loud. But with the brain, I notice it. I'm like, I can very easily tell my sleep wasn't off. I will have 20% less brain function for the day. And I
Yeah.
get so
Yeah.
frustrated because I'm like, no, tomorrow's a big day. How could I not have perfect sleep? Why did I wake up too early? Or why did I have a glass of wine and sleep too late and screw the whole thing up? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's where I think it's so good to have the tools. Like I have a nightstand covered in tools, and on any given night, I'm like, okay, I think I need more support today. I think I need less support today. But that's why I wanted to ask that reliance question and if there's any negative impact. So you mentioned there's a lot of things
Yeah.
that damage or reduce GABA in the body. What are some of those things?
Yeah, one that I've explored that I'm learning more and more about is
Mm,
EMF. So we are kind of bathed in this electrosmog soup that's ever increasing, and where our exposures are, increasing over time. So with electromagnetic radiation exposure, it's all about distance and time. So we used to have like, some dead spots in life, right, where you weren't
yeah,
exposed, where you weren't, your cell phone didn't work as well, or you didn't have Wi-Fi in that part of the house. Now we are, continually bathed, especially if you live in a city in the U.S. I live in Seattle. I'm in Virginia right now, but I live in Seattle, and it's a 5G city, which means there's going to be more higher frequency waves closer, more antennas in your
sure,
neighborhood. EMF has been, it's obviously beautiful in the way that we can connect and we can learn and we can grow, but we have to understand the impact on our bodies. And we're really in a grand experiment right
totally.
now. So there's many kind of mechanisms that we're learning about. So, I want to point you to research. Dr. Joe Mercola has a great book called EMF. Um, Dr. Marty Paul has a great mechanism that he looks at, the voltage gated calcium channels, and how a lot of exposure of EMF, especially close to the brain. So if you use your cell phone and put it on your head, if you sleep next to a Wi-Fi router, or a smart meter, or any other smart devices. And again, this is not just one exposure; it's exposure over
Right.
time, that we can increase the permeability of calcium in our cells, that creates a more lower threshold for excitability. And all of a sudden, we're creating this neurotoxicity, this hyperexcitability that doesn't turn off. There's a lot of conversation around glutamate. So there's this balance in the in our bodies around glutamate and GABA. So glutamate can turn into GABA, but when we have a heightened kind of glutamate, if you think about the seesaw, right, there's more glutamate than GABA, then we see neuroinflammation, these more hyperexcitability symptoms, anxiety, right, ADHD, children on the spectrum, insomnia. There's too much activity in the brain that you cannot calm down. So that's a big one. Again, this is kind of still a frontier that we're learning more and more research, but I look at studies every year, and it keeps on growing. I've had mentors early in my life that taught me the impact of EMF, and so I do think this is important. And one of the biggest sleep hygiene tools that, we of course give people solutions, but also sleep hygiene to help with circadian
Yes.
rhythm. And one of the biggest things we do for insomnia is to turn off your Wi-Fi router, and even get a kill switch and to turn off your electricity at night. Have your sleeping location be a safe haven. We can't really control our environment, but you can control what you can at
True.
home. And if you can get 8 hours of a reduced exposure, that is going to be healing for your brain. So just, the first step, just turning your Wi-Fi router off at night. Make sure that you don't have any electronics or anything plugged in your bedroom. There are, even more advanced techniques depending on where you live, the money that you have to spend, and the, really kind of how sick you are. That can include shielding your bedroom. I don't believe in shielding your whole house anymore, because that's harder and harder. And we do need the healing energy from Mother Earth. We cannot live in a Faraday cage. We have to interact with our environment, but we can create a sleeping environment. So, before 5G, my bedroom and my daughter's bedroom, we used a graphite paint from Europe called Y Shield to reduce the exposure. You have to do that with a building biologist to get that grounded. We have films on our windows. And then, if you live in an apartment, you can get a little, it looks like a canopy, a mosquito net kind of canopy that you can have. Um, again, like a kind of a little bed that is shielded. Again, you have to do this with a lot of guidance and a lot of support so you don't amplify your exposure. And then you don't have to go there, though. A lot of these things that I've shared can reduce exposure over time.
I really appreciate you saying all that because I have all these thoughts. I actually don't teach that topic, but I'm very
Yeah,
passionate about it. So in my own
yeah,
life, I fight with everybody that we cannot have our cell phones within 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet of ourselves when we're sleeping. Nothing in my bedroom is
yeah.
plugged in. I shut off the Wi-Fi on purpose at night. Unfortunately,
Oh,
my
I love
husband
it.
likes to work later and wake up earlier and work than I do. So I have to like respect his um needs, but I'll shut off the Wi-Fi for like 75% of the house. There's only one Wi-Fi router and it's the farthest away from the bedrooms. And I think each
Mm,
thing adds up. So like you mentioned at the end,
yes.
we don't have to do it all, but each thing adds
Yeah.
up. So a lot of times I'll take a phone call and I'll be like, is it worth killing yourself? No.
Yeah.
Take the phone, put it on speaker or
Yeah.
Bluetooth. It's got to be a few feet away from you. Like sometimes I'll be with my phone and it'll be on my chest as I'm looking at it. I'm like, is it worth it? It's not.
Yeah. Distance is your friend. Yeah, distance is your friend. And my friend, Dr. Beverly Rubik, who's done a lot of research on this, she says that just this is overwhelming, but even just your cell phone use, because that's a personal device that many people keep on their body, even shifting that reduces exposure over time.
Correct. And it's funny, I was
Yeah.
just in Europe, and every minute I was walking around, everyone was holding their phone in their right hand, or maybe I noticed I'm right handed, but everyone's mapping and GPSing and watching where they're going. And I thought, will we all have right hand cancer one day? Like,
I know. I
I
know.
wonder
It's a good
if you
point.
hold it
Yeah.
constantly and you never let it go and you never put it down unless you're eating for a bit, what does
Mhm.
that say for your total exposure for the day?
Yeah, and there's the, dopamine kind of, hits every, 2 minutes people will, pick up their phone, studies say. And so, we live in a culture where, this was so exciting, but we've kind of hit this point where it's just, becoming more and more, and we have to find balance. We have to definitely find balance and, feel empowered to do so.
For sure. And my next question to you is lymphatic health. Ayurveda has taught
Yeah.
for thousands of years. It all starts with the gut. And we know 80% of the
Yes.
lymphatic system is residing alongside the gut. And so Ayurveda always said,
Mm.
focus on gut health and you will win at all health. And it
Yeah.
seems like you, from what I've seen, have done so much work with chronic health issues. And that's actually what got me into this space is my whole family's diabetic. And then I grew
Oh.
up seeing the catastrophic end game of what that looks like in the last quarter of your life: heart attack,
Mm.
stroke, Parkinson's, leg amputations, all
Mm.
of it, quadruple bypasses. And I thought, whoa, we have to look at this way earlier. We have to address inflammation. We have to address obesity, exercise. We have to address
Yes.
stress. But growing up, I
Yeah.
also felt like I had no immune system. And I've learned much later leaky gut was part of my life. And when it comes to lymphatic, I think that we completely ignore and forget the lymphatic system, and honoring the
Mhm.
lymphatic system is one of our main jobs as human beings for prevention.
Yeah.
Like we just don't think about it. We're like, oh, I eat well, I exercise, whatever. And I literally think about it as, am I moving enough? Am I moving my lymph? Ayurvedic self-care involves dry brushing, abhyang massage, like this understanding that moving that lymph is probably your first job right alongside honoring gut. So can you dive into that and just share how we should be approaching lymphatic health?
Yeah, absolutely. This is, again, such a rewarding system to focus on and very overlooked, often. And we don't talk about lymphatic drainage until somebody has, very, advanced edema or cancer or, they're in that kind of, algorithm. And so I love to share and educate, especially in the chronic illness community. This is really this site and, how I've really kind of advanced my thoughts over the years and kind of I look from really, the surface of the skin, and we can even talk about the energy beyond if we want today, but the surface to the skin to the nucleus of the cell. Many great thought leaders have, shared with me that there's a connection and a through line to these kind of connections through the fascia and the lymphatics. So we call it the tissue continuum, the living matrix. So I have studied naturopathic medicine and also bioregulatory medicine. And a big part of where we focus is what we call the extracellular matrix, which is the beginning of the lymphatic system. So the circulatory system and the lymphatic system are highly interconnected. So, blood flows from our heart. It makes its way, this oxygen, nutrient rich blood, to our capillary space, this microvascular space where the lymphatic fluid starts from the blood and leaves the capillaries and bathes this extracellular space with oxygen and nutrients. And some of it flows back to, be part of the venous system and back to the heart. And a lot of it starts in this extracellular matrix, which its job is to again bring nutrition, but again remove waste. And these lymphatic capillaries are intermeshed in this inner extracellular matrix, and so this is a very high activity space. And so the health of the space is like Dr. Pishinger said that the cell is not anything alone, but it's the environment of the cell that makes either health or disease. And so we can really change our terrain and change our epigenetic expression and our mitochondrial expression by draining this space. And so how we look at it is that, we have the fascia, which is, very abundant in collagen. We have the proteoglycans. We have the lymphatic fluid. We have mast cells in the space, and we have fibroblasts and hyaluronic acid and elastin. And with the things that I talk about all day, heavy metals, glyphosate, parasitic infections, Lyme and co-infections love hanging out here. So you need a very, confident lymphatic system to drain this space so it doesn't become stagnant and there isn't a breakdown in cellular communication. There isn't a, widespread cell danger response that the body can tackle and, take these toxicants and pathogens to through the lymphatic network, which is made up of a one-way valve system of vessels and nodes and organs and glands to share with the immune system what we're finding so we can take it out of the body. And the lymphatic fluid finds its way back to the heart and the circulatory system for the liver and the kidneys to then take it to the next step. So it is also, I do believe, trauma gets stored in the fascia and the lymphatics as well. I've also read papers that include the lymph in the blood as a liquid fascia. So the blood is really, the blood doesn't work. The lymphatic system doesn't work with the blood. So I've been really focused, especially with spike protein and COVID in our terrain. We're seeing more microclots. We're seeing more endothelial glycocalyx issues, more impaired nitric oxide, more, sticky, stagnant blood. And so we need a good blood flow to have good lymphatic flow. We need a good hydrated fascia that we can move, that's not adhered or restricted, to allow this fluid to move freely in the body. So we can break it down even more if you like, but that's an overview.
I love what you said is you need a confident lymphatic system to clean house. And it's
Yes.
you
Mhm.
shared so much in there, but at the end there you talked about congestion and things being
Yeah.
adhered and things being slowed down and a clogged blood system that needs flow. I studied turmeric in depth, so I immediately thought turmeric increases blood flow. We are part of contributing
Yes.
to helping with that. But if we don't stay hydrated and healthy and reduce that inflammation and support lymphatic, it sounds like everything just comes to a grinding halt.
Yeah, yeah. Big part of, how I approach chronic illness is that, first of all, I believe anyone can get better from anything. There are no limits on what, healing is possible for that person. And then, the body is more intelligent than, any doctor will ever be, so, I was talking to my friend the other day. I'm like, what do we really do? We excavate and liberate the body to do what it knows how to do. And we do that through this system, through the kind of the blood, the lymph, the fascia, the autonomic nervous system, and allowing these, like these physical stressors to be liberated and removed from the body, and also vibrational patterns that is in the realm of trauma or in ancestral epigenetic influences, or thought forms that are not around a healthy biome and a healthy system. And we look at all of that and empower our patients to have a lot of tools that they can really work closely with their body to alleviate the stagnation, because stagnation really is the root of disease. There's many complexities to that conversation, but if you have stagnation in your brain, stagnation in your sinuses, stagnation in your tonsils, a stagnation in your dental microbiome, if you have stagnation in your spleen or your liver or your gut, or your pelvic floor, or in your adrenals, like that's where healing, isn't happening, So, but if we support the body to break down and alleviate that stagnation and give tools that are going to bind and grab those toxicants and reduce that microbial burden so that the immune system can get on top of everything we've just shared about. So it's complicated, but there's as I say, like an elegance in treatment. And again, our job as providers is really to prioritize, right? To prioritize, because I use bioresonance and bioenergetics and muscle testing to dialogue with the body to prioritize. But sleep and lymphatic health has always been foundational.
Sure. And you said some very powerful things in there. One you said was thought forms for a healthy biome. And I wrote stagnation in your life equals disease. And it's interesting because from Ayurveda, body, mind, and spirit in alignment is the goal. And
Yes.
so many times
Yeah.
when we think of and talk about health, we think of the physical. The lymphatic
Yes.
system has to move. The brain needs to be supported. The gut needs to be supported. And I probably don't speak into it enough, but it's body, mind, spirit, and it's connection.
Yeah.
And so I love talking to practitioners like you because you completely get it.
Mhm.
so much of disease is created in the mind or in our interactions with others. And so my daily practice when I
Yes.
make wake up is my own very personal meditation, but I'm communicating with my energetic aura. I think of it as my
Yeah.
energetic shield. And
Mhm.
I really
Yes.
use that very strategically. So when I go to meet with people or events or conferences or even just starting off my day, I tune in to what I'm calling in, and I'm very specifically
Yes.
tuning into what I am keeping out. And
Yeah.
I
I
think
love that.
there's so much, like you said, ancestral and things that we come in with. I'm of the Hindu faith. So in our belief system, which is very similar to the Buddhist belief system, we come in with certain karma. And our job is
Yeah.
to clear that karma, do so much good, love so much that we leave lighter and liberated and ready to just be in bliss or heaven.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting when you see so much disease nowadays. Sometimes I just
Mhm.
wonder, like, could we have just gone to meditation camps and yoga camps and like could we have just worked through it
Mhm.
energetically maybe instead of always
Yeah.
chasing our tail with the medical trying to fix the problem. So
Yeah.
what are your
I
how do
love
you
that.
approach that?
Yeah, I love everything you said. And I'm kind of on a spiritual journey myself. And, many of my patients are as well. And they're very amazing people that teach me every day and their openness to really explore this realm. And I really think that we're going to be in our lifetime, Shivani, that we're going to kind of change the equation, and that it's not chemistry that dictates physics, but physics that dictates chemistry. And I study a lot of different people, but I want to give credit to Joe Dispenza, who says, to change matter with matter takes time, but when you change the field, you change matter. And I've really thought about that for a long time. And I think in functional medicine, in these medicines, in how I've practiced for many years, is that matter, we're good. We're really good at it. We know how to change matter with matter, but it takes a lot of time. It's, a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. And I think that people are getting sicker and sicker, and the physical is getting more stressful and more stressful, that we can't excavate every toxicant or every pathogen. And we really have to understand that we have this whole amazing toolkit in the realm of the invisible forces of fields and information that we're all surrounded in. And I think, kind of on the flip side of the EMF conversation, there's a consciousness that people understand that we communicate with these invisible fields all along. And now we have to bring it back to our lives and our body, and that, we live in a unified field, the quantum field, the, 0 point field, the quantum vacuum, and we are, highly supported. And there are many, many potentials that we are allowed, and we have the free will in this lifetime to participate and co-create. And I think that, I don't want to shame anybody who has an illness, because we all come in with many factors. Nobody knows why, we have these illnesses, but we can have a very empowering choice of how we move through them. And I think the more that you become in alignment with your higher self, the more that there is this coherence in the physical and the non physical parts of you. That's really what we're here to explore, I believe. And that's really where healing can be, I think, accelerated for many people.
Absolutely. And I love that word coherence. Like, talk about a
Yeah.
beautiful word. It reminds you of
Mhm.
harmony, harmonious, ease and flow. I mean, so many
Yes.
times when I'm teaching circadian rhythm and doshas from Ayurveda, all I'm really saying is we're seeking coherence, we're seeking bliss and joy in those states. Can we just allow ourselves to be in them? Can we release
Yeah.
all this chaos and mechanisms and the mechanics of life for brief periods of time? One way I teach it, I don't have my teacup here, but I teach something called tea time is me time. And it's just this
I love it.
moment where I just pause and tune in to my own intuition. And my goal is to ask, hey, do you need anything? Everything okay? Is there anything I'm not thinking
Yeah.
about that I need to be doing? And it's fascinating. If you just train your own intelligence, your intuition from the inside to be that guiding force for you, it knows far better answers than your mind does. And I just wonder
Yeah.
sometimes when you do see these really serious big health issues come along in people's lives, it's like, where can we bring the mind body piece into the healing conversation. Because even for myself, when I got diagnosed with leaky gut, I was like, okay, we're going to do a protocol. We're going to take the best probiotics and we're going to do the work, and we'll add in those gross prebiotic foods I don't like. And Ayurveda says ghee, so we're just going to put ghee on everything, and then we will win. But if you forget, your own intention and mind has to be part of this equation. And could you have healed the leaky gut by removing stressors, people who you need to have boundaries against, the things that are
Yes.
damaging your gut energetically, maybe aspects of your life that you hate that you need to change? And so it's so much more about that bringing life into alignment that needs to be brought into
Mhm.
the chronic disease conversation. But it's usually not, because we're in such a Western medicine construct, even in functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, Ayurvedic medicine. Like, we're still thinking so much about, let me fix you, as opposed to let's make
Yeah.
the time to talk about how you're going to really fix yourself here.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I love, this inner navigation system you mentioned. And I work with a lot of sensitive patients, like the people who like can feel the cell phone
Yeah.
and can, tolerate one drop of something and they build up. And, I see these patients and, really their gift in this process is this amazing intuition that they can feel kind of everything in life. And once they kind of figure out this filter to kind of stabilize their system so they can, actually know it's them and not them, and to, really come from this place. They know more than I do. I just really just share. I have the experience and the pattern recognition and the toolkit to give them the tools, but they know in their body what they need. And I think that's a really, really beautiful gift. I think, we all want to have that gift of knowing in our life. And I think that's a big part of, this excavating and liberating, getting to that true kind of like heart kind of knowing, and to navigate. And so, and I do, I think there's a time, I've seen this because you can't just maybe sometimes start with, oh, just meditate all your problems away. One of the things that I see in the chronic illness community is that it really affects their spiritual
Mm.
connection. When you're in survival and you're in this really kind of state of suffering, it's really hard to connect to source energy. Like that's one of the most heartbreaking things that these people explore and they experience. So there is this kind of stabilization, through good sleep and lymphatic support, but also adding more coherent energy to the
Mm.
patient's field through either prayer circles, group healing, sound, light frequencies, to healing touch, healing friends, community, to start remembering that vibration of what it feels like, to connect. And then they get well enough that they can generate it on their own. But I think there's um, definitely a time and a place that there's a kind of a step into that if they're at this place of really, kind of suffering. So that's why we have each other.
Absolutely. I love that. I think it is so important that we kind of bring back that coherence and vibrational support. I never thought about that, but yes, that is the power
Mm.
of energy healing and touch and massage and sound, like you mentioned. Because sometimes you can't support the vibration on your own. You've been robbed of it is a strong word, but it's been depleted. And so because it's
Yeah.
been depleted, it's like you need the support to bring it back in. I think of that often when it
Yes.
comes to surgery. I've had a few surgeries, and each time,
Mhm.
and I'm insanely anti-surgery. But when I have to get a
Yeah.
surgery, I just prepare for it like a marathon, because in Ayurveda we teach
Yeah.
that there's this thing called ojas, and that strength and vitality, that nectar of vitality that we develop will be completely eliminated. And you're going to have to build
Yeah.
it back with love. And that's going to take so many of
Yeah.
the things you just talked about. We think of it as just food, but it's not just food. It's everything else coming together.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I mentioned offline, I had my own experience 2 years ago. I was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor, but it was very large. It was affecting my pituitary. It was flattening it and affecting my optic chiasm. So I hadn't realized it, but my night vision was getting a little kind of shoddy. And then I had bilateral defects. So I didn't notice it because it was, on both sides. And, very shortly after an MRI, found out I had to have surgery in 2 weeks, and there was no supplement I could take to make that a better experience. But it was really kind of my own personal journey on this to change matter. With matter takes time, but when you change the field, you change matter. And I, did all the things. I surrounded myself with my friends. We did, healing circles. I worked with several energy workers. I meditated, I visualized. And so I made the most out of that. I generated the best outcome I could given the
Yeah.
circumstances. Um, and I had a experience at the end at a follow-up. My doctor, he was a really lovely neurosurgeon, and I donated my tumor for them to study because we were at a university hospital. And I asked him about the pathology report. I was like, what was this about? What did you see? And he was like, it was interesting. I'm going to study your tumor for a very long time. There's different cell types. It was different, it was unique. And most of all, I want to understand why such a large tumor, he does 400 of these surgeries a year, comes out so easily. And I was like, well, if I could only tell you, what I did. So he was a great surgeon, I have no doubt. But I do believe that the things that was my validation and my own experience and my own
Yeah.
journey, that what we did really mattered.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, it was really cool. It was kind of, obviously a very scary experience on one level, but it was a very empowering experience because I got to see the power within me.
Absolutely.
So,
And I agree with you. Whenever something big like that happens in my health, it's so big, it becomes all encompassing, it becomes an obsession. And then I love proving myself right. I'm always like, yes, what I teach is absolutely valid and it completely works. And I was so right. And every tool I've learned is valid. And I love that feeling because you're like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm so, thank goodness that I learned all this. And this is what I get to teach because it works.
yeah, yeah. And I'm a big believer this conversation that we had today, the observer effect, right? The more people that we can share this knowing, this knowledge, the more that they can participate, co-create, and observe this in their own life. So that's, really exciting.
Absolutely. And one final thought I had wanted to ask you was when it comes to chronic illness, so many
Mhm.
people realize eventually, like they've got all these symptoms, they go to the doctor. Sometimes the symptoms really have to stack up before they start showing up as the diseases that we're seeing in modern day times that are exploding and
Mhm.
becoming such epidemics. When it comes to chronic illness, in functional medicine, naturopathic medicine, and these more integrative systems, we look at it as okay, let's unearth what's really going on here. Is it gut
Mhm.
dysbiosis? Is it mold? Is it parasites? Is it
Mhm.
toxic burden, environmental factors? Where did the system start going in the wrong direction? So in your opinion, based on
Mhm.
this experience you've had, what are some of those key big things that our audience should kind of listen for or pay attention to symptomatically that indicates that something's
Yeah.
coming wrong down the line that you don't want? And what are some of those big ones that you see? Is it like mold is the most, or parasites are the most, or is it our
Yeah.
plastic water bottles? Is it our water quality, air quality?
Yeah.
Like what, how do you look
I
at
know.
it?
Well, it's really all of it, and it's, really dialoguing with the person to understand where they are. But there's definitely a common theme. And I kind of, we all make up how we do things, right? Like we try to explain it, in words. And right now I'm at this place where I say regulation, drainage, resonance, coherence, regeneration. That's kind of like what I do, I guess, at this point in my career. And so I think regulation is really what we need to talk about for that, answering that question. So this is that divine intelligence that we all have, this ability to self-regulate and heal. We recovered from surgeries, we cut our hand and it heals, right? This is that self-healing innate ability. And in bioregulatory medicine, we have these things called interference fields. So these obstacles or boulders in the road that you can't really overcome, or you plateau, or they're chronic poisonings in the body until you remove them. The autonomic nervous system and the fascial system are not going to be able to regulate and heal to their fullest extent. There's a the body isn't working as a coherent whole. So that could be scar interference fields. Scars can be this denser, more regular connective tissue underneath the surface of the skin, that they can become a traffic jam for the lymphatics in the fascia and be a kind of like a reservoir of toxicants or trauma, even that, really is held in that tissue, because often scars come from like a surgery or a stressful or traumatic event. The C-section scar is something I often do for
Wow.
women. Um, and this is like a memory that's coming from the body. It's not coming from the mind. And I always warn people, just because I want them to feel safe. And they're like, oh, that's not going to happen. And all of a sudden, like they have an experience and the body is releasing these vibrational patterns that are creating distorted, basically patterns in their system that's affecting their regulatory capacity. So scars are important. The dental
Mm,
piece is huge. So
yeah.
the oral microenvironment is huge for the health. So if you have amalgam fillings or root canals or cavitations in your jawbone, that can be a chronic source of toxicity that affects nerves. The vagus nerve can affect the lymph, can affect the circulation. So that's
Yeah.
huge. And then the tonsils and the sinuses are in the same boat. Like if the microbiome is distorted and either of those tissues, that can affect lymphatic drainage, that can affect the immune system overall, and that can affect, the gut and the brain. So that's kind of like my cheat sheet. Like, and then of course, if you live in a moldy home, it's very hard to get
Sure.
better in a moldy home. But some people are more sensitive than others. Some people can get better in a moldy home, and some people can't. So it's just you find where you are in that spectrum, and then we unpack it, right? So there's this kind of intersection of toxicants, trauma, and pathogens, and you kind of I believe the environment and our emotional and kind of the thought patterns are kind of really the root causes, but those all impact the nervous system and the microbiomes and the ecosystem in the body. So we have to unwind it and unravel it, and that takes pattern recognition and listening to the body and dialoguing in the body. We obviously have to get the terrain in a shape that it can eliminate. So drainage is
Mm,
important. Supporting the organs of um, elimination with the lymphatics are really important. And from that kind of foundational space, of course, sleep
yeah.
as well, then the body can start to heal and deal with what we're sharing and giving with it.
Makes
So
sense.
that's a little bit how I work.
So
Yeah.
you had said regulation, coherence, and then what were the other three words?
Yeah, so regulation, drainage. So we're going to find the areas that are creating,
Stagnation.
obstacles in the body's ability to self-regulate and heal. We're going to drain the body, and we're going to drain the fascia, the lymph, the blood, um, the the lungs, the skin, the liver, the colon, the kidneys. We're going to use resonance techniques to find vibrational patterns that are going to that's your protocol, right? What does the body need? How do we dialogue with that? There's different systems that you can use, or muscle testing is great, or like a highly in tune person. And then coherence, we're going to add more coherent information to the body. And then we're going to shift the epigenetic and mitochondrial epigenetic expression and allow the body to regenerate, and sometimes assist it with adding peptides or exosomes or other things to help stimulate a regenerative response. So that's kind of what I do. Yeah. And I'm always learning. So ask me next year, it might be different. Yeah.
I know all about that. I think we all are constantly learning, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to chronic illness. There's so much there, and each person is so different. You've got different templates in people, different patterns, as you're calling it. So when it comes to the clients that you see, is it that it sounds to me like the people who have the most complex, difficult chronic health issues who got no answers anywhere else are the ones who eventually find you, and then you're able to dig in and unpack, start clearing the path, support that terrain and biome, and then even bring in the, you can call them bigger guns, but like the bigger, wider tools that exist that most people don't think of to kind of bring back in that healing and then rebuild.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's exactly what I do. And, I'm not perfect, but, I help a lot of people and I get them on a path, and, they learn a lot about their body. And I have very long term relationships with my patients. Even when they're better, there is kind of this, we live in, the 3D kind of human experience. We're not in utopia right now, right? So there's a lot of stress coming at us, and so I'm here for people when they need it. So yeah, that's definitely what I do, and I really love my work, and I think we're in a really exciting time where we can talk about this stuff online, where we used to have to be quieter about it. And I think there's a lot of eyes on looking at post-infectious syndromes, and looking at physics of life, and looking at all of this. Drainage is a word that people know now, that when I studied all this, nobody knew what we were talking about. So it's exciting. I think that we are in a time where we're going to really create a new system of medicine that really, we have the conventional when we need it. The integrative is awesome, but really, not that everything we shared is an afterthought, but a beginning and a starting point. And it's really
It is
exciting.
really exciting. And when you said all that, I thought, how does she take care of herself? What is your how do you take care of yourself as a practitioner? Because I started seeing clients and I quickly realized that there's a heaviness to seeing people and their health issues, and there's a discipline to being able to see people but not take it all in. And I have not
Yeah,
learned that yet.
yeah,
I don't know how to not carry
yeah,
everyone in my auric field. So now I very much limit who can book me for consultations. And I've almost told my team, like, a few a month, guys. I can't take it. I can't do all my work because I worry so much.
yeah,
Like I know someone right now who has cancer and it's driving me nuts because I'm like, that is tough. How do I support this person? So how do
yeah.
you take care of yourself?
Yeah, very sweet question. So, I learned early, like you can't take it on. You can definitely care, and have deeply care and be deeply empathetic without taking the weight of it. I have some trust, even how awful, what I see. Everyone's on a soul journey and a soul path, and that they have the ability to get well, that I don't have to save anybody, but I can facilitate and collaborate with them and care deeply about them to get them better. And so, I've just figured out in my own energy system how to, hold a container, but not take on the weight, and, again, I'm not perfect, but I definitely have figured that out over time. And then I meditate, I try to meditate every morning, and then I work out, do yoga and different, I like to be in nature and walk every morning, and, some other type of exercise. I have a lovely family. My husband and my almost 6-year-old daughter, is quite joyful for me, and, brings me into the present moment. Time and time again, when I want to get out there, I have dear relationships and family and friends that I can share, and, who love me, and that was something that I really felt when I was in surgery. I could feel their prayers and their love, and that was very transformative for me. And yeah, I'm on a journey like everybody else, to figure that out. But it's a process, and I love what I do, so that makes it a lot less heavy for me.
Absolutely.
So
No, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. It's a great reminder because when I meet practitioners like you, I always think, wow, you're carrying it. You're seeing the hardest patient, and that usually burns a lot of people out because it's not easy to see
mhm.
the most difficult. You see that happen a lot in functional medicine. People will change the
Yeah,
the way they see patients because it's tough to carry so much. So thank you
yeah,
for all the work you do. I read your newsletter. It's one of the very few newsletters I actually read because I really enjoy it. I love this product, Somnium, so thank you for making it. Like I said, I have very select few products that I just fall in love with so deeply that I personally use all the time, and this is one that I've been telling my clients about.
oh,
And I'm going to try Lymph Flow because I'm so curious now about your other product, and how they work together for brain health. So I'll report back my own glymphatic
thank
experience with it all. But will you share where
you.
people can find you? And then my code for your website is Dr. Shivani. So if anyone's interested in ordering Somnium and all the fun things, you can use my code to order.
Oh, thank you so much. So, my product store is um, iPothecary, like apothecary with an I, store.com. And then my clinic in Seattle is called Eminence Health.com. We see patients from all over the world, and depending in the U.S. where you live, we can establish care virtually via telemedicine. And then, I also have a podcast as well called The Spectrum of Health. You can find more about that on drchristineschaffner.com.
Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.